Welcome into the Autzen Audibles Podcast Monday edition. It's a mailbag. It's USC week. I'm Matt Preem, Eric Scopel, Jared Mack on the show. There's a lot of news in like a 2-day period between these two teams. A new defensive coordinator for USC. The Trojans have fallen out of the top 25. Yet this game still carries a large weight, and I suspect that this is going to be a mailbag focused entirely basically on this weekend's game.
Going to be a lot there. Going to be some stuff looking forward. Yep. Going to be a big picture question here to start from @DuckObsession. Bo Nix sits just behind Michael Penix in odds to win the Heisman. Marvin Harrison Jr. is trending towards stealing the show. What do you think Bo has to do to get over the hump? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. Thank you, Duck Obsession, for the question. I don't know if you've asked one before. Thanks for joining the show. Well, there's potential for a head-to-head between these two guys. Have we talked about that possibility before? That maybe Oregon and Washington could play again? That would be interesting. And if that happens, obviously, Bo beating Michael Penix in a head-to-head would probably go a long way in terms of creating some sort of separation between those two. Just to simplify it, I guess, winning out regular season, pretty obvious stuff here. But if Oregon were to win its final 3 games against USC, ASU, and Oregon State, that's going to be big. Winning the conference championship, like I said, over Michael Penix would be big. And then continuing to hit some of these statistical barometers. I know when we had Josh Pate on the show earlier, he was talking about how kind of silly some of this stuff gets, but the reality is it is a narrative award. And if Bo sets the single season completion percentage record, which he's got a chance to do, that'll be something. Mm-hmm. I was looking just last night, kind of comparing Marcus Mariota's Heisman Trophy season with where Bo is right now. And it's not an even comparison because that offense was really different back then. And Mariota ran for a lot more yards, had a lot more rushing scores. But just as a passer, Bo's completing about 10% more of his passes. Marcus was at about 68%. Bo's at 78%. Their quarterback rating were basically identical. The touchdown to interception ratio are very similar. Obviously, Bo's played fewer games. But I bring that up to say, the statistical resume that Bo has created to this point is at least pretty on par as a passer with what Mariota did back in 2014 when he won. So continuing to do what he's doing puts him in a position to win this thing. And then obviously there's a bunch of stuff that's outside of his control around the country of if Marvin Harrison Jr. and Ohio State win the rest of their games and he gets 200 yards receiving every single game, and against Michigan he has 5 touchdowns. That's sort of out of Bo's control. But, aside from those sort of things happening around him, if this just does become a Penix-Nix Heisman Trophy competition, that game, if there is one in Las Vegas, could be what decides it. And I did look it up because I know when Jared and I were leaving Autzen, we were talking to another reporter and we were wondering when the Heisman ballots are finalized. Those do take place after the conference championship games, as they should.
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple for me. If Bo Nix wants to win the Heisman, he just has to continue doing what he's doing at an elite level and take down Washington in a potential Pac-12 championship game. Michael Penix has had 1 or 2 Heisman moments already this season, especially against Oregon, and then you can add in the USC, a couple of touchdowns there that I thought were really impressive. But again, not as good of a defense, so subject to interpretation, but he certainly had that come from behind moment against Oregon, which was his quintessential Heisman moment so far this season. Bo Nix has had a lot of great moments, but I don't know if he's had a specific Heisman one. And he's going to have a couple more chances down the end of the regular season, and he's going to have a potential chance to do it against Washington. So I think if they get to the Pac-12 title game against Washington and Nix severely outperforms Penix, I think that could sway some voters' minds, but I think that's really honestly the only option of how Nix is going to win the entire Heisman is to have a standout performance in that title game if it happens. Because right now I think that Penix and Marvin Harrison Jr. are ahead, and I know that Nix moves up in the rankings or the ratings or odds every week, but I think those two guys are ahead of him by a good bit.
I mean, I don't know what else to say because you guys have laid out the path. It's win and play good. You do neither, and you're not going to win. It's pretty simple. I think if Nix comes out and has a poor performance in a win, it probably doesn't eliminate him from contention, but it makes it really hard. If they lose a game like to Washington and he just is astronomically better than Nix, he probably stays in the mix, but it's going to be a long shot for him to win. It's an award that kind of goes now to the best player on the best team in college football. You have to be generational, like Caleb Williams was last season, to win the award, and not be on the team's best, the best teams, in college football, or one of the two best teams in college football. And luckily for Oregon, they're playing like they're one of the best teams in college football. So if they win and he looks good in those wins, he will have a shot. He's going to be in Vegas, or he's going to be in New York. It would be a shock if he doesn't get an invite, in my opinion. But can he win it? It's going to dictate on how well he plays and how well Oregon plays as a team.
I just was pulling up updated Heisman odds here to get a feel for it, and
hope he got him at plus 900.
Well, plus 3,000 a couple weeks ago. Yeah, if you look at this, it does look like it's Penix, and I mean I don't know. There's a wide range of odds here, but most have Penix at plus 150 and Bo at plus 200 to 210 right now, and Jaden Daniels is becoming a little bit of a more distant third, and Marvin Harrison his odds are a little more slim than that right now. It's plus anywhere between, again, these are a lot of odds here, 1,000 and plus 2,000. But as we said earlier, there's opportunities for him to make up ground. So, I mean, Nix is on the doorstep, at least right now, according to what Vegas is saying. And there's obviously a ton of football to play. Sorry, I've had a kind of a gnarly cough the last couple of days. Hopefully that doesn't interrupt the show too much. But good question there to start. I think that's something to take kind of a appraisal of as we get further into this, of like, Oregon's playing for something special, and obviously that's what's going to be central for the team. But secondarily, there could be some big award stuff here as well. All right, second one from @Quackinator, and now we're getting into these USC specific questions. This was not a Twitter question. This one came from one of our site members who asked if he could send me a DM with a couple of questions. He did, so I chose this one from @Quackinator. With Grinch finally out at SC only a week before the Oregon game, and the position being taken over by the team's defensive line and linebacker coaches, not that it will matter either way, considering how well Nix and company have been executing Stein's offense, but should Oregon fans expect to see a slightly more motivated and prepared SC defense on Saturday, or an even more dysfunctional and demoralized version? Or is 1 week simply not enough for significant changes to be made? And since the new coaches are disciples of Grinch anyway, it will almost certainly be more of the same. Any insights on this development? Long-winded question there, which is what you get when it's not on Twitter with the limited number of characters. This is the story of the week, probably, in terms of like what happens with SC's defense. Does it get better? Does it get worse? Does it just stay the same? Like, I think this is something that, like, this to me feels like the kind of a linchpin in this game. Obviously, Oregon opens at 2-score favorites. They should be. I think Oregon is clearly the better team. SC is reeling right now. They really haven't played good football at all since mid-September, late September. The defense hasn't really been impressive at all this entire season. I mean, it's impossible for us to really say one way or the other, but it does create an interesting element here of, like, sometimes you see coaches canned and then the next week they play really, really well. We just saw it in the NFL this last week with the Raiders. They fired like their entire staff and they go out there and thump the Giants. I know the Giants stink and they had a lot to do with the why that was a 30-6 game, but sometimes you do see teams rally behind new coaches or rally, because of maybe they didn't like what was going on previously. I can't speak to all of the dysfunction or whatever that was going on at Southern California, but I would lean that they're pretty darn motivated in this game, regardless of who the defensive coordinator is, just because if you're a USC defensive player, you've been getting ridiculed all over the place for the last month or so, and more than that if you've been with the program longer. So I don't know if it'll be a big net positive or net negative either way. Maybe one of you guys has a stronger inclination, but I would imagine that the guys are going to rally behind this new group of coaches. But I could also see the opposite happening, where it's just they get flattened early because Oregon's really, really good on defense, and that creates even more doubt and questions internally about what they're doing defensively.
I would be surprised if USC's defense didn't come out, I don't know, like hair on fire with their new defensive staff. That's just kind of what happens in football. It's very strange. You would think that it would be like the complete opposite, where, they only have 2 regular season games left and their staff gets fired, and they would just kind of not quit on the season, but just be like, oh, well, the guy who brought me here isn't here anymore. Like, what to do? But in football, usually works exactly the opposite. Like Eric went through with the Raiders last year with the Colts and Jeff Saturday. Like, teams kind of rally around coaches being fired, which I always think is interesting. Like, I guess it makes some sense, but in my brain it doesn't. So there you go. But I mean, I to go on like the other halves of the questions, it's just too little, too late. I mean, a new defensive thought process isn't going to change how poorly USC tackles or change how poorly they understand their own defense, and the lack of communication in the back end and blown coverage assignments in every single game. It didn't change the fact that Dylan Johnson averaged 10 yards a carry and 256 yards with 4 touchdowns. Like, a lot of people will blame Grinch, and I understand it because this has kind of been like the MO with him and Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma and now at USC. But there's a lot of other problems. It's like getting guys who are physical enough to compete in the trenches and getting tackling better. A lot of issues that first-year defensive coordinators have potentially, but this is Grinch's second year in USC and after a whole transfer portal offseason. So I just think it's too little, too late. I don't think it's going to matter too much. They'll probably play harder, but what is that going to do? They played hard last week. They played hard 2 weeks ago and still gave up 50 points basically in each game.
Yeah, like they'll play with more effort. They'll play harder, but that doesn't mean that playing harder equates to less tackles missed or less, plays out of position. There'll be some tweaks. There'll be some minor adjustments that they'll do, but like less than a week before they play Oregon, and we're not going to see this entirely different defensive scheme.
Exactly.
And what they have, they just don't have time to do that. And so it's going to be very similar to what, they've ran under Grinch. I just don't think they have good players on defense. And Grinch is the big problem for USC, but he wasn't the only problem. And eliminating Grinch is just the first step in their efforts to solve all of their problems on defense. And this isn't going to change. There's not going to be a dramatic increase or, change with how USC is effective or ineffective on defense. They are who they are. There's 2 games left in the season for them. And, this is just a preemptive move that Riley had to make probably to take pressure off himself, and if he didn't, it opens the door for him to be fired down the road. And that's all that this is. I would still expect Oregon to play really well offensively. I would still expect USC to have their moments defensively, but in the end, they're going to be out of position. They're going to miss tackles, and they're just not good on that side of the football. And they're going to have to hope that Caleb Williams can lead the Trojans to 50 points again, because that's what it's probably going to take to get this win.
And I guess the last thing I'd say is, let's say they do come out and get more exotic or get creative and do things Oregon hasn't been prepared for. I have a lot of confidence in Oregon's staff for finding solutions on the fly, right? I think that's something we talked about last week and throughout the year of this staff has been really good at adapting. And that's obviously one of the things Dan has brought up several times this year. So let's say SC does come out and show some things that Oregon isn't prepared for or isn't expecting to see. I think that's something that would take a drive or two maybe before Oregon suddenly snaps and figures out an adjustment that kind of takes advantage of maybe what that defensive, game plan that they are in, what's susceptible there. So I think you could see, again, like some small tweaks. You're not going to see like suddenly their base defense is different and suddenly they're entirely different scheme. That's not how this works, but they might show a couple looks that they haven't traditionally been in. Maybe they go more. I haven't done a deep dive into how they actually play, so I don't know if they're strictly a man-to-man coverage team, maybe they show more zone, or the inverse is true, and then it takes a little bit of time for Oregon to go, oh, they are actually doing something a little bit differently. But again, these are things that I believe with the staff and then also with Bo leading this offense, I have little concern that you're not going to see them figure it out. And over the course of a 60-minute game, Oregon's just too good offensively, and I think good enough defensively where even if they start slow, I don't anticipate it really being too much of an issue with the final result.
It also feels like if you're USC, like have you not been trying these other things before?
Sure. Yeah.
Like, oh no, we're just gonna install this completely new package this week. Like, couldn't have used it the last couple weeks where it's like 40+ points a night against you guys. Like, I'm not sure what they'll do in terms of going to like the wishing well and trying to figure out something to put on the field, but I can't imagine it's going to be anything crazy enough there where they haven't already at least built it somewhat into their game plan, or at least tried it or talked about doing it. Like they have been in need of answers for a long time now. And maybe the new defensive coordinators, I think it's like a joint operation there at DC. Maybe they unleash it. I don't know how many times you have to turn the stone over to try to find an answer here for USC's defense, but it might come multiple times this weekend. But again, like Eric, like you ended with, I don't think it's going to matter.
I really don't. All right. Third one from @Cody_R_S. Cody was smart here. He sniffed out that we'd be talking about Alex Grinch. So he has this question for us. The big one this week will be the effect of Grinch being gone. Keeping with that theme, Tosh will be a name for openings going forward with how he's improved as a coach from the last year to this year. Are we seeing the last year or two of Tosh despite Lanning's connection? #Autzen Audibles. I kind of wanted to throw this out here because last season the talk was Tosh would be gone, but for the same reason Alex Grinch is gone because people thought Tosh was bad. I don't really have a great answer in terms of what are Tosh's long-term goals? Some people don't want to be head coaches. He's never been a head coach. Does he want to be a head coach? He just went from the NFL, and I don't know if you guys watched that interview with Adam Brenneman that he gave, but he talked about how he had a pretty sweet deal. He really liked what he was doing professionally in the NFL. He came to Oregon in part because of Dan. He said this is the third time Oregon had offered him an opportunity to be their defensive coordinator. So it seems like he's pretty happy here. The question is, does Tosh want to be a head coach, and is somebody willing to allow Tosh the opportunity to be a head coach of their program? Again, something he's never done, despite being a pretty big name as an assistant for more than almost 15, 20 years now. So to the point of like, am I expecting this to be the end or close to the end of it? I don't have a real great answer because I don't have a great sense of like what Tosh's like aspirations are. Like he might be somebody who's like, I'm cool being a defensive coordinator on a kick-ass team for like 15 years. I love working with Dan. I like Eugene. I want to be here forever. Or he might be somebody who's saying, I came to Oregon to show that like, hey, I'm more than just a recruiter. That was something he talked about in the interview as well. And I want to run my own program. And if X, Y, or Z comes calling, I'm taking off. So I don't have a great answer to that part. I do just think it is remarkable how the fan base has changed this offseason from, and I'm not pointing at Cody because I have no idea where Cody's mind was coming off last year, but there were some people last year who were saying Tosh needs to be done after this year because he's not good enough at his job. And now it's completely swung the other direction where he's so good, maybe he's leaving, which just speaks to the whole cycle of thought and analysis with how we do all this stuff.
So maybe rash decisions shouldn't be made.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's incredible what a defense can do when they have the right personnel and the guys that they want in their locker room. Yeah, this is an interesting question. I'm kind of like you, Eric. I don't know if I have a really great answer for this. I don't expect it to be one of the last year or two of Tosh with Dan. But like you said, Eric, like I don't really know what his aspirations are either. Where it's like, yeah, no, like we've heard other coaches talk or at least be head coaches in the past and know that that's the ultimate goal is to get back to that head coaching position. But for Tosh, never has been. He's been the defensive coordinator at some good places. He's got NFL experience. He's done well by all means, like at basically every single one of his stops. There's been issues in the past, and I'll leave it at that. But that hasn't stopped him from getting good jobs, and I don't think it'll stop him from getting good jobs moving forward. Also, Oregon pays him a lot. They pay him a lot of money to be their defensive coordinator, and it sounds pretty good. It's less responsibilities than a head coach. He just gets to focus on the defense, which is something that he loves, and gets a good little check every couple weeks. So that also incentivizes him to stay because he's probably making more than a head coach would make at the school that would offer him a job. So I'm sure that helps. And I also think the relationship with Dan is pretty impressive. Before like these interviews with Adam, what's his name? I can't remember the guy that I can't remember who he works for, but Brenneman. Those have been some good interviews, and it really has showcased like the relationship that Dan has with a bunch of his staff members, and it seems like him and Tosh are two of the tightest there. So I think all of those reasons kind of make me feel like I don't know if he'll stick around forever, but I don't feel like it's going to be the last year or two anytime soon.
I'll go real quick. I think Tosh is in a really good place. We've heard that a big reason why he left the NFL to come to Oregon was Dan, but we've also heard the family connection. His wife is from the Pacific Northwest, and they wanted to get closer to home, and this job fulfills that. But I think this is going to be a case of where he's probably going to be very selective. Like he knows he's got a really good gig. He knows he's really close with the head coach. The head coach is tight with him on and off the football field. He's paid a lot of money, like Jared said. And so it's a case of every person, whether it's in sports or whatever business you're running or academia, whatever, like every person has this like idea of if I was in charge, I would like to do X, Y, and Z, or I would love to be in charge so that we could do X, Y, and Z. Sure. And so I don't doubt that Tosh has that feeling. And he wants to prove that he can be the guy leading an elite football program. I also don't think he's just going to be throwing his name out looking for a head coaching job every single offseason. He's going to be very selective of what type of job he would get because he knows he's in a really good position here. He's paid a lot of money, and he's in a place that fits him on and off the football field. Could it be the end this season? Yeah. If a school comes calling that fits that criteria, he could take the job. He could get the job. Will it happen? I don't know. But I would be surprised if it's kind of like both sides of your mouth. Like I think he's going to be here a long time, but like if a job opens up that's high profile enough, it wouldn't be a surprise that he gets it. He's not going to go after the USC D coordinator job. I don't think he's going to leave Oregon for another DC position. It's going to be a head coach or some kind of role maybe in the NFL.
Just to extend this slightly, what kind of a job do we think is within, like you kind of said, like he's going to be selective. I totally agree. He's not going to like become the head coach at, I'll just throw out a school, Wyoming next year just because it opens. What do you think is like actually a type of job that would be within his realm or what do you think what would he be targeting if he was looking to be a head coach, do you guys think?
I mean, why can't he do what Dan did and find a Power 5 school that has past success and the resources around it to turn it around quickly? It sounds like I'm saying like a top 10 job or a top 15 job, but he's not going to go to Washington State or Georgia Tech or Vanderbilt, but like, what happens if a Missouri opens up, or if UCLA for whatever reason ever opened up,
or Cal, his alma mater.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I don't know about that one. I mean, their academic support.
I was kind of joking.
Their athletic support is terrible.
I was kind of joking about that one.
But like a North Carolina, those type of programs where they've had some success and they're just on down times, and but they can get back really quickly with the right people around it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. It's going to have to be a school, like you said, Matt, where it does have past success and it's kind of on the rise, maybe a little bit underneath where they expect them to be, and they need a jolt to the program. Tosh is still young. We all know that he's a good recruiter. He can certainly bring talent to campus. It's just more of like he doesn't have any coaching experience, which is a big question mark going into anybody's hire. It was a big question mark when Oregon hired Dan Lanning because he didn't have any head coaching experience at the collegiate football level. So I think that would be a big question mark. The school that immediately popped in my head is South Carolina.
Ooh.
Because I don't know how long Shane Beamer is going to be there for, but I don't know if South Carolina would even really go after Tosh. I think that Tosh is a wonderful defensive coordinator, and at Oregon with him and Dan Lanning, their two brains together can have a defense that's going to be good for a long time. I don't know if he's a head coach. I've never seen it. And I don't know if South Carolina would say, yeah, no, we want the guy who's never been a head coach before to be our head coach at South Carolina. And our fan base would definitely be okay with this.
That's the challenge too. That's kind of where my head has gone, is like, because I agree, because I feel like Dan and Tosh are a little different in terms of Dan was like just a rocket, right?
Dan was like the chosen son, like him and Kenny Dillingham.
Yeah, just so quick. They elevated from their mid-30s. Like Tosh has been doing this. Like I said, he's been I remember when he was Xbox Tosh recruiting for Cal and Washington and taking all the recruits Oregon wanted, back in the mid 2000s, like 2004 to 2008 range. It seemed like he was just grabbing guy after guy. Maybe 2005 to 2010, somewhere in that range. But so he's been around. That's why it's kind of interesting to think about what he would actually take. But I agree, like he's not going to take a stepping stone job, because he's already done the stepping stone work, if you will, in terms of being a really high-profile coordinator, and he's won a national championship. And this year's defense is a defense that could allow Oregon to play for another. So, I think he would be very selective. But to your point, it's also like, how selective is a school going to be? Is like the right marriage seems like it might be tough here for Tosh to take off.
All right, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll wrap up the edition of the Autzen Audibles Mailbag. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles Podcast. 3 questions in, a couple more to go.
All right, fourth from, I think, another first-time question asker at WMC Bride 212. It's probably W McBride. Sorry about that. Considering what we have seen from Noah Whittington in the past and how much Jordan James has improved this season, who do you think will be the premier back for next year's team in place of Bucky? Getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here, but I thought it was interesting, in part because we spent a little bit of time on Saturday talking about the future of the quarterback position, which is a position we will certainly be talking about a lot going forward. And we talked about Ty's development and how that was encouraging. And there were actually several questions that were mailbag questions that were posed about that, but we'd already kind of discussed that on Saturday. So I figured I would halt that conversation for the time being. But I hadn't really gone through this exercise, so I kind of wanted to talk it out a little bit with you guys. I agree with the premise that Bucky will be gone. I would be absolutely floored if he decided to come back. Maybe NIL is really, really great and he decides to come back. But at running back, your earning potential is so small in the NFL that you really just want to avoid taking hits. So you want to get to the NFL as soon as you possibly can. And Bucky has certainly proven to be an NFL caliber running back. Before we get to that, Jared, what is the mocks like? Where is he perceived right now, Bucky, in the mock drafts? Have you seen? Is there enough out there?
I haven't really seen him in any mocks, usually because at this point of the season, it's just like 1 or 2 round mocks. I don't think he's a day 1 guy. I think he's likely a day 2 guy, probably round 3, 4, 5. But it's a running back. Like I've said in this podcast many times, running backs aren't as valuable as people would like them to be. So he's probably a day 2 guy, probably 4th, 5th round.
I was going to say,
Depends on how he finishes the season. I think his ceiling is probably like end of 2nd.
I was just going to say that's where my head went. I feel like he's a 3rd round running back is about the range. But okay, I just wanted to get that part out. I don't know. I thought this was interesting because Noah was awesome last year playing kind of that, number 2 role, and Jordan's been really great this year playing that number 2 role. So like kind of who's in a better spot. And here's the one place I will start, which is Whittington, I think, suffered a pretty significant injury. I don't know if we talked about it much on the pod, but we've seen him around practice. The last time I saw him, he was still on crutches. He's got a full leg brace, like that looks like, and I've heard that there was some ligament damage there on his knee. Like I don't think this is like a minor injury. So I would anticipate Jordan has the leg up to start next season just because of Noah maybe not being fully back. Like who knows? Like it varies so much these days with like, hey, how soon are you actually healthy? And then how soon are you back to where you were before? Like we've seen guys like, I don't know if it's obviously a totally different position, but like Junior Anguilao, like seemingly just isn't fully ever the same human he was before because he just doesn't even play now for Oregon. And I don't think ever will play. But that was a guy who was like a 3 or 4 year starter at Texas and suffered a pretty significant knee injury, and now he's not available. I don't think that'll be Noah's story, but that's certainly a possible outcome. I think Jordan gets the leg up, and if I were to just say like, if both players were fully healthy and there was no concern with the injury, I'd still probably have Jordan above Noah just in terms of the explosiveness and what he's shown this year in this offense. I think Jordan James is a really, really good running back. I think Noah Whittington's a really good running back. I think this is a great problem to have, but I would lean Jordan over Noah just based upon what we've seen most recently, where I think Jordan is running. We talked about Bucky's ceiling as a running back. I think Jordan, I don't know if it's higher, but Jordan is certainly somebody who has an NFL future. And I think Noah probably does too, but I'm probably a little bit more bullish on Jordan's than Noah's.
I don't know.
It's tough.
I like both of these running backs a lot. I like Jordan James. Obviously, we've been able to see what he can do, and frankly, because of Noah Whittington's injury, he gets more reps now. But I think people have forgotten how good Noah Whittington is. He also has the opportunity to go pro after this year. I don't expect him to.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised. I think next year, like if he's 100% healthy, I might put him as the starter. Mostly because he can pass block, and he was the only running back on this team that could pass block. You see, there's a lot of sets that Oregon will run where Bucky Irving is going out on a route, and it's not because they need him to go out on a route. It's because he's not the greatest of pass blockers, as we saw against Washington. They took advantage of him, and so maybe that's why I start Noah and give him the upper hand over Jordan in this hypothetical world. I also think he's just a great runner, very similar to Bucky and Jordan. It's not like these guys aren't really good at their positions, but maybe I'll give Noah the slight edge because he's a better pass blocker than Jordan James is. But I think if you're Oregon and both these guys come back and are 100% healthy by the start of next season, I don't think it matters who gets to start.
Doesn't.
It's kind of like last year. I think Noah got some of the starts, if I remember correctly.
Early on, yeah.
But it's not, it's like, okay, cool. They're still going to run, 20 times a game each. Like it's not going to make a big difference in who gets to start, who doesn't get to start. But I think I would give it to Noah if they're both 100% healthy in this situation, just because of the pass blocking abilities. I think that's a good separator and could get more playing time in this offense.
A couple things. One, if Bucky can't pass block, he's not going to be a 2nd or 3rd round draft pick. That's just not going to happen. They're not going to use a pick that high on a guy. I think he's one of the best in college football. But to your point, Jared, running backs, the value, it's not there. It's not what people want it to be. I think he's probably more of a 4 of a 5 round pick, maybe even 6. He's not very big. but he struggles pass blocking. He's tough as hell. He's hard to get down. His vision is insane. He's going to get drafted, but he also has some deficiencies, and he also plays a position that just doesn't have a lot of value. That being said, both Whittington and Jordan James are going to play equal amounts next season. I think Bucky's gone. I think both those two guys will be kind of 1A, 1B, and it'll be a lot like last year where Noah started multiple games. I think both. This is the problem that you want as a football program. You have 3 NFL running backs on your roster in 2022 or 2023, excuse me. One of them is hurt, and the third guy on the list, who's Jordan James, has flourished. And you go into 2024 knowing that James is elite. Noah Whittington, if he's healthy and fully recovered by the time the season starts, will be an NFL caliber running back. And it doesn't really matter who starts or who finishes games, because whoever is out there is going to be a dude. And you've got 2 of the best in the conference, yet again next season. So it's going to be a lot like last year. The starts will rotate. The usage will rotate. They do different things. They do similar things. But the common trait is they're both really, really good running backs.
Okay, then here's the last question. Jordan James, Bucky Irving, hired NFL draft ceiling going forward. Obviously, Jordan will not be in the same draft as Bucky, but do we think Jordan could even be a player who's taken more highly? He is physically bigger.
Yes, I think it's because he's bigger. It's because he's bigger.
This is a tough one. I just think what Bucky Irving does in the field is something that so few running backs can do. And this is coming from a running back hater. I just think that his specialties are more special than Jordan James's specialties. Certainly helps that he's bigger, and he has another year of development here at Oregon. He's only a sophomore, so he gets another year. So it'll be interesting to see the similarities and the differences between those two in their junior seasons, respectively. There's just something about Irving as a pass catcher as well that really helps his draft profile because of how pass-heavy offenses are in the NFL and his ability to get guys to miss in the open field at every level, whether a linebacker, defensive back, whatever. So I think I would give it to Bucky. I think I would give it just because of his abilities that are really special. But I'll be interested to see what Jordan James looks like with like a full workload next year.
Yeah, I just think it's fascinating, and big props to Carlos Lachlan for the room he's built. Because remember, none of these guys were here before he was. He went out and he added these 3 guys the moment he got on campus. Think about what that has meant for this program. That's 3 for 3, and that's pretty damn impressive from Coach Lachlan there, who seems to have an eye for talent. I mean, I remember when Noah was taken. Remember, we were kind of like, okay, he was at Western Kentucky, he had like 600 yards. Like now it's like
Western Kentucky, a giant pass offense too.
Exactly, true. But like it was kind of like, okay, yeah, and it was an inexperienced hire for Carlos, and there was kind of some questions. Dan's done pretty well in finding these diamond in the rough kind of coaches, like even Alik, who is obviously super young and had experience here, has panned out really well. So I think the fact that we're talking about this speaks to how well Coach Lachlan has done.
I'd like to rebuttal as well. Jordan James has half as many touches as Bucky this season. I think we're seeing a similar trait to what Jordan James to Noah Whittington happened last year, where Jordan had a very limited role. And now that Noah's hurt, he's had that opportunity to get more time on the field, and it's exploded his production. I think if you gave Jordan James the same amount of reps that Bucky gets, and I'm not saying he should this season, because Bucky is the better player. But I think if we gave Jordan as many opportunities to see what he could do as Bucky does, I think our tune would be a little bit different of what Bucky can do, or what Jordan can do on the field. I mean, he's played 82 total plays with the ball in his hands, and Bucky this season has 154. And their yards per play average is basically the same. Jordan's actually better than Bucky. So I think there's an argument there that if Jordan could get the same opportunities, his numbers would even be better. Because how many times yes, I completely agree that Bucky's vision and his ability to make something out of nothing is special and is very rare, and it's the best on the team. But how many times have we said, holy smokes, how did he get through that for Jordan James? He did it against Cal, that touchdown run where he hopped his way through the defense and took hits while doing it and still stayed up and went into the end zone. He does it every game. He just does it on a limited number of opportunities because Bucky gets the bulk of the load, as he should.
Both are really good players. Like there's no argument here. I like both these guys a lot, which is why I would have Jordan as the guy next year. I mean, I think they're really, really talented.
Mm-hmm.
I think Bucky's better. But, I mean, I don't.
Yeah, no, there's no problem with either one of them. I think they're both really damn good. And if you're Oregon, you're lucky to have two great running backs, even after you lose another really good running back in Noah Whittington for the season. I think Bucky gets the bulk of the carries and bulk of the reps because, I don't know, I think maybe the staff trusts him more. Maybe they just see that he provides an opportunity that Jordan James doesn't. But yeah, Jordan James always comes up and flashes on any rewatch. Anytime you're at the game, he has moments, just like Noah Whittington had moments, just like Bucky when he first got here had moments. Like everybody was like, "Holy cow, this Bucky Irving kid's real good against BYU." He had a couple of plays where he just got out of tackles, went down the sideline, made guys miss. I think they're both great running backs, and Jordan is performing in his limited capacities as well. I think, if you gave Jordan the same amount of opportunities as Bucky, it would be very similar production. And I think that's a great testament to Oregon's offensive line because a running back is only as good as his offensive line can be. If they both have the same holes, they'll get there. But if the offensive line wasn't as good as it is this year or was last year, I think it would be a little bit harder. But I think both of these running backs are special enough to make opportunities out of nothing.
Yeah, and that's what Bucky specializes in predominantly, is making something out of a very limited situation in terms of how many times has he entered a hole, there's a guy there, he makes one guy miss, right, gets to the second level, drags a guy and gets 8 yards when it's that should have been 3 yards. I've compared it to a baseball stat of wins above replacement that they use, where it feels like Bucky just outproduces what the average guy would do on so many of these runs, where it's he gets to a spot and a lot of guys would go down here, and yet Bucky ends up making a move and ends up further upfield than the average running back probably would. And Jordan, to Matt's point, certainly does plenty of that. He's had 2 straight weeks with those touchdowns where, or I guess 2 of the last 3 games with those touchdowns where he just won't go down. It was Washington State and also Cal, where he just ran through a bunch of arm tackles. All right, last question from @Ryan 716468000. That can't be a phone number, I don't think. I think that's one too many numbers, or I would make a guess that was somebody included their cell phone number on their X account. Ryan asks, what's the latest status on freshman redshirts? # Autzen Audibles. Ryan, thank you for letting me highlight a story I post every Saturday after the game, which is an update on the True Freshman Tracker. And I'm just going to run through this really quick, and then I figure we can kind of have a real quick conversation about what we think happens with a couple of these guys who are on the fringe. 9 players right now in this 2023 recruiting class have avoided redshirt. Those 9 are Kenyon Sadiq, Poncho, Blake Purchase, Cole Martin, Tatum Tuioti, Mateo Uiagalelei, Jaden Lamar, Amari Washington, and then most recently this Saturday, Dante Dowdell played his 5th game, so he will avoid. So both running backs will be sophomores next year, not redshirt freshmen. And then there's a couple of guys here who are right on the fringe with 4, and that would be cornerback Roderick Pleasant and linebacker Jerry Mixon. There's a bunch of guys with 3. There's a dozen guys with 2. But we don't have to get through all those guys because I don't expect, unless something changes dramatically, any of those guys are going to be playing. I guess just as a quick talking point, do we think Roderick or Jerry are guys that they're going to burn their red shirt or not? I mean, both of those guys have dressed, I think, every game, but I'm not sure I see a need for either to play a 5th game.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. I thought it was surprising that Oregon burned the red shirts on both running backs, but I think
there.
they just need them. I figured it would just be one more than the other and maybe save it, but I think that's a fine decision. With Roderick and Jerry Mixon, I just feel like there's a lot of dudes in front of them. I think if Oregon were really inclined to burn through both their red shirts, they would have seen the field this past game against Cal in that fourth quarter because, the little final drive for Cal had basically all true freshmen. Ashton Porter, Jaden Moore, Terrence Green, Johnny Bowens, Michael Gardner, like all those guys got in there. But the cornerbacks were Traquez Bridges and Nico Reed, and then Dante Manning on the drive before. And then the safeties were Damon David and I can't remember the other one, but
I think it was Cole.
That was an opportunity. Yeah, it was Cole. That was an opportunity to get those guys in the game, and they elected not to. So I think if you're Oregon, you were going to try and keep their red shirts intact, but barring a change, I don't see how they really get on the field with that many people in front of them on the depth chart.
Jerry Mixon himself was asked right next to me, leaving the Cal game, by a teammate, "Did you get in the game?" And he said, "No, I have played too many games."
Whoa! Breaking news from Matt.
Yeah. Clear indicator that he is redshirting this season, or they're trying to redshirt Jerry Mixon. So I have got a lot of confidence that he doesn't play more than 4 games in this season, unless some kind of injury or something happens. And to Jared's point, both guys would have played by now. They would have played more than what they have done if Oregon was totally cool with burning their red shirt. I think with certain guys, a red shirt is a sign that Oregon's staff is very confident that they will be here either for 5 seasons, or they look at it as this isn't somebody that is going to be so turned away by not playing as a true freshman that they enter the portal by the end of the season. I think there's different cases for all of these, but you look at some players and think, we think this is a guy that's not, he's not going to be in college football 5 years. 4 years is probably the max he's going to be. So who cares if one of those 4 years that he's here, he plays 6 games and 7 snaps per game. It's more valuable for that than it is for getting only 2 years out of this guy of full game reps or whatever it is, because then he goes pro as a redshirt sophomore instead of a true junior. I think there's guys that, to keep them motivated, to keep them intact, that they play them more than the 4-game mentality, because they think if it clicks, he's probably not going to be here in 5 years because he won't be a 5th-year senior. Or if it doesn't click, he's got that redshirt year available, and he can go somewhere else and play college football down the road. But it's hard to manage players with the portal, with the NIL, and the fact that guys can play 4 games. And you look at the opportunities at hand. The ASU is probably going to be a blowout, so you're going to have opportunities to get those guys in the game. Does USC this weekend turn into a blowout? Does Oregon State turn into a blowout? I don't know. Do they find ways to get guys into the game? I don't know, but it's hard to manage, and one I think I'm happy I don't have to figure out.
Dante Dowdell is a good example of what you were saying there, Matt, in terms of probably being like, we might want to play this guy to keep him kind of focused and make sure he's not going to look around. We remember how many SEC schools were looking at keeping him down south this last cycle. One other just last thing on the freshman class, and I'm not going to say I'm totally stunned Jurion hasn't found a role, just because it's pretty clear now with 2 years of Junior Adams that he likes to get basically 5 guys and play those 5 guys. And honestly, this year it's been closer to 4. So I never would have anticipated Jurion would be one of those 4 guys, or even maybe you could have argued, I could have been convinced like he could be their 5th guy, but even their 5th guy now, which is probably, I don't know, Kyler Casper, like he's not exactly playing more than the kind of end of game opportunities. So, but Jurion being at 3, I do wonder where his mindset is. Is he okay with that? I would imagine the answer is he must be. But This was a number 2 ranked receiver in the entire country. He's played 3 games and hasn't really produced at all. So he's going to be someone who will probably play a much bigger role in future years, hopefully. But just think that's kind of interesting that the headliner in the class is not one of the guys we're talking about who are the 9 who will not redshirt in 23.
And just, I think there's just guys in front of him that I think it really would have benefited Jurion if he came in during the, whatever it is, the spring term before that. I guess winter term, he could also come in. And it's, from the guys that we're all discussing here, most of them, the guys who have been played and guys who did use up their red shirt were guys that were here that came in during the winter or the spring. They got to learning the system. They got to they got to get into the weight staff and, build their body and be up to the level of college competition with their physical identities as well. For Jurion, I'm not totally surprised he's not playing. We all kind of went into the season thinking we could see him playing because it's just his pure talent on the outside. But I don't know, I don't know who he's going to take over reps from. I think unless he learns slot and comes in for Gary Bryant at points, but he's not a slot receiver, and that's fine.
No, he's not,
because they're not going to need him to be a slot receiver when he develops and understands the playbook better and gets onto the field. So he'll probably redshirt. I don't know. Unless he's going to redshirt. Unless it all clicks immediately. I don't see an opportunity for him to really get on the field and make a big impact over the course of the final couple games.
Just last thought, really quick, is Jared, 7 of the 9 guys who are not redshirting were here in spring.
All right, it's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. Thank you for listening to the show. Thank you for submitting your questions. We'll be back on Tuesday. Well, Eric and Jared will be back on Tuesday with what happened with Dan Lanning Monday night and also player reactions as well. And then we'll dive into the rest of the week here on the podcast. Until then, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you later, folks.
Peace.